well, now I've got an echo. Don's the Associate Director for Water at the USGS, and is going to be giving an overview of Water Mission Area priorities, and then he'll be followed by Chad Wagner, and then I'll follow Chad. Thanks.
All right, can folks hear me okay without an echo?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to have USGS Water Mission Area talk with you today. I guess I'll start by sort of the current events and our stance and posture here in the COVID-19 arena, just to let everybody know. I'm sure everyone will agree that it's been an interesting couple of months. In March, late March, the USGS went on essentially a full emergency response mode, sent folks home to telework and like everybody else. And then by mid-April, we began to settle in on something that's a little bit more like a steady state condition. And then through the last couple of weeks, been focused on plans for how we'll do a phased return for work. Since late March, all of our water science centers have been operating on maximum telework for office tasks, and we implemented a lot of the new safety protocols to let them get out and do essential work. And initially, that meant deferring things that required close quarters, like working in boats and working in helicopters. But we've sorted most of that out, and we're starting to get to those things as well. At the same time, most of our water quality laboratories have been open throughout this period so that we can conduct time-sensitive analysis for things that can't be reached. Now, as states are beginning to ease restrictions, we expect to have a little more flexibility to begin working on additional field activities, but so far we're doing pretty well on most of the things we need to get done. So, like everybody else, we're kind of feeling our way through all this, but we've been able to keep pretty busy doing what we do. As we've been working on the pandemic and all the extra effort that's gone into that, we've also been continuing our work on strategic planning. We've been really putting a lot of effort into that over the last year or so, and thinking hard about where we think the Bureau needs to be in the next 10 or 20 years. And what kinds of things we're going to need to do to get there. And the bottom line, I guess, to just kind of sum up our strategic thinking these days, is that we're really trying to drive towards a more integrated approach to how we do our science across the Bureau. We can come up with many different examples where it isn't just the water piece, it's not just the ecosystems piece, it's not just the hazards, it's the intersections between all of these where a lot of issues lie. We don't want to lose our core strengths in those areas, but we want to begin working on those intersections. We're focusing strategic thinking really on 4 key areas. They basically correspond to data, integrating our science, advancing the delivery of our information to decision makers. And then there's all of these are kind of underpinned by technological innovation. So I'll talk about these a little bit and then turn it over to Chad and Mindy to really get into the meat of what the Water Mission Area itself is up to. So the first one of these themes to close our data gaps by enhancing the unified USGS and monitoring networks. Basically, across USGS, most folks on this call are probably familiar with the stream gauge data, probably our groundwater and some of our water quality data as well. But USGS has a lot of different data networks and collects vast amounts of data, including things like Landsat satellite data. And across the Bureau, a lot of these things are sort of disparate. They're done in different ways and put into different systems. If we're going to work on the intersection between our science, we're going to start bringing all these data together. So one of the foci here that we're really working towards is to do just that and enhance access to and linkages between our various databases that range everything from water quantity and quality to breeding bird habitat. At the same time, we need to enhance our observing systems. We know that across the biology and physical sciences, we're generally underobserved. We lack sufficient number of observations to do all the things we need to do. One big push that we're going to be making in the USGS is to try to enhance and fill gaps in some of those networks, in particular to help us scale from the process scale understanding that we have a lot of strength in when we go out to a field site and really understand how something works, to try to bridge data gaps so that we can go from that scale all the way up to regional and national scales in a more seamless way. That means developing new types of sensor systems and new types of monitoring networks. In particular, there's a few that are really important to this. One is LiDAR. That's not new, but we're really pushing that hard because high resolution terrain is key to a number of things that we're trying to do. There's also a keen interest in hyperspectral remote sensing. There's a lot of things that we would like to be able to measure that can help us with. And so we're looking into opportunities, especially on unmanned aircraft for those sorts of things. Getting our data into shape and getting some of those gaps filled is kind of job one. But the bigger job is actually advancing integration of our science capabilities across the USGS. We have mission areas in water, ecosystems, hazards, topography and mapping, and so forth, that all are sort of disciplinary domains that grow up and evolve in their own silo, so to speak, from an academic start all the way into what we do in USGS. And bringing those together is quite a challenge, but there's a number of reasons to do that. Advancing our models, each of these mission areas have a substantial history in modeling their piece of the Earth system. Bringing those together to advance the overall Earth system prediction skill is really the crux of what we're driving towards here. We believe that bringing more of the USGS terrestrial science into the Earth system prediction realm can help accelerate improving prediction skill in the seasonal, sub-seasonal, and even out to decadal timeframes. Land processes in general and their feedbacks to the atmosphere have a lot of memory and have a lot more impact on predictability in those timescales in the troposphere. So we have not been a big part of this sort of effort in the past, but that effort is kind of converging on the sorts of things that USGS is really good at. And so we're starting to look at how we can bring our science to the table to try to help improve prediction skill in those time frames. An example of where we think this can really make a difference is in predicting the onset of drought. By predicting by linking our predictive models of drought conditions across landscapes with some of the tools that we have, like high resolution topography, high resolution land cover information from Landsat, improved hydrography through things like NH2 plus and NH2 plus high res or hydrographic network models. Some of our advanced models in groundwater and surface water interactions and in how these interact with the atmosphere. By pulling all these things together, we can start to get at some of these important processes that contribute to memory in the prediction system and contribute to that skill, or conversely, not having them compounds problems with those predictions. So we think all of that will help. And then, of course, we can start to tie all of that together with things like our models of biological responses and ecological flows, land cover land use change, vulnerability to wildfire, and things like that. So this is kind of the idea behind the strategic direction we're taking, is that we can do more, get more bang for the buck by pulling these things together and improve some key areas like mid-range prediction skill. To that end, we're launching a new initiative called EarthMap, which is Earth Monitoring, Analysis, and Prediction. It's really kind of a program at this point that is aimed at integrating these different capabilities across the Bureau. So it's looking at all of our data, the different data systems we have, the different types of data we collect, how to tie that together. It's looking at advanced Earth systems modeling frameworks and how do we build things, for example, like architectures, software architectures that can tie very different types of models together so that we can get things like coupled hydroecological models and biogeochemical models working in the same environment. And all of this is really dependent on really leveraging our cloud computing, our high performance and high throughput computing assets, and growing those to be able to handle the load of this more integrated modeling and prediction effort. The third theme is really about what we call developing actionable intelligence, and on that at the speed of decision making. One of the comments that we get most frequently from a lot of our cooperators and stakeholders is that they love our science, but we're slow. We look at a problem, we conduct a study, we write a publication, we answer the question, but it may not be in time for some of the decisions that need to be made. Everything that I just mentioned, tying our data sets together, tying our models together more effectively, can help with speeding that up. But it also gets into how we even collect data in the first place and how we process that information as part of the science process. So we're looking on the data collection side at instrumenting key watersheds through things like the WAAS, the Next Generation Water Observing System, which Chad will talk about in a minute or two. Instrumenting those with more robust networks with more real-time sensors that can get data to the table faster to enhance our understanding of the different variations in quality and quantity of water, as well as other factors like ecosystem health, invasive species, and so forth. We're also working on automating interpretation of Landsat using new tools like AI and machine learning to help us with analyzing rapid change, say after a wildfire, more quickly after the event, and begin to incorporate that change information into current prediction models. Using those tools to look at early detection and monitoring of other things like harmful algal blooms, contaminant monitoring, and then even getting into using those kinds of data or looking at stream classification and trying to understand a little better the actual riparian characteristics around our streams that in the hydrography networks are just represented by basically a blue line. The fourth piece of this is really the technology piece, and I think everyone is pretty well aware that there just is an explosion of innovative technologies these days, has been for some time, and that's expected to continue. We've adopted a number of them. We have a lot of activities, for example, in the artificial intelligence and machine learning realm. We're an early adopter in the cloud and things like that. But we're really trying to work towards establishing more of an Internet of Things approach, in particular to our field sensors and to our laboratory instruments, so that essentially as soon as a sensor senses something, makes a measurement, or as soon as we've completed a laboratory analysis, that information can go to the cloud and be part of a data lake, if you will, that basically gets that table out and gets that data out and accessible immediately. And moreover, with the Internet of Things concepts, start to tie those data together in ways that we might not really anticipate at this point. Other technologies that we're looking at and thinking about are a little bit less traditional in our line of work, but for example, in the arena of stream gauges, we're thinking about how things like blockchain could help us. Blockchain basically being a transaction monitoring system approach. How can things like blockchain actually help us maintain our stream gauge networks more efficiently? If we go out and change an instrument on a stream gauge platform, Can we track that transaction and essentially know how to deal with our supply chain for new instrument replacement, those kinds of things. So those aren't so much technologies that are going to make a big difference from an external point of view, that can help us get to this new place we're trying to get to much more efficiently and hopefully less expensively. Starting to look at quantum computing, that's a burgeoning new area that we are just really dipping our toes into, but a lot of what we do in the earth science arena involves nonlinear processes and nonlinear algorithms, and the new generation of quantum computing are really well designed to deal with that. So there's kind of a marriage waiting to happen there, but it's also very early in the technology, and so we're just starting to explore what quantum computing can do for some of our work. But we expect it to be pretty useful for things as we move into this broader modeling arena. We expect it to be useful for modeling probabilities and uncertainties without the need for massive computing capabilities. So that's kind of a thumbnail of what we're thinking about. We are not done with the planning process yet, but hopefully that gives you a sense of where we're trying to go as a bureau. Within the Water Resources Mission Area, we're really reflecting the same things. You'll hear from Chad and Mindy about improving our observing systems, improving our modeling and prediction capabilities, improving our capability to conduct integrated assessments, and modernizing our data and information delivery systems. All of that, of course, is more in the realm of water and hydrologic science, but that's a key starting point actually for the whole Bureau, since an awful lot of what the Bureau does essentially starts with water in the first place. So I'll leave it at that and be happy to take any questions on any of this or anything I haven't covered, and then I'll turn it over to Chad and Mindy to talk more about our programs in the Water Mission Area. Thanks.
Thanks, Don. Deb, I don't know quite how you plan to run this. Do we have time for questions for Don, or do we want to go right to Chad?
Mindy, we can do it either way. So if folks want to ask questions now, or we can hold them till the end.
Well, let's jump into, I guess, Chad, are you going to go first?
Chad, I think I've just given you the presenter role, so if you have a slideshow or something.
Chad, we can't hear you. You might be on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
We're good now? Okay. Let's see. Let me share here. Attempt to share. Let's see. Just let me know when it shows up for you all, because it looks like I've shared.
I can see it, Chad.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, thanks for the intro, Don, and thanks for inviting us to give you all an update on some of the water mission area initiatives that we've got going on. You all have heard from Mindy and I a couple of times a year, at least for the last couple of years, on some of the new things that we've got going on. So just want to give you some updates on where we are on some of this. And so I will focus mostly on our integrated water monitoring initiatives as I lead the water observing systems portfolio. And then Mindy will take over and talk a little bit more about our research and water assessment activities. So let's see. Just want to get a check on how quickly the slides change. Are they have they changed yet?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, good deal. So to piggyback off of what Don was talking about, some of the USGS 21st century, the vision, he mentioned this Earth map, which is, the map stands for monitoring, analysis, and prediction. So the goal of Earth map is to design and build an integrated observation and prediction science capability. And so, okay.
So can everybody check to make sure that they're muted, please?
I think this is WAAS, Tom. Mike?
Okay.
Okay, there we go. I think that might have been it. Looks like everybody else is muted now, so we should be good. All right. So back to the Earth map. So Earth map is in essence trying to seek to deliver well-integrated observations and predictions of the future state of natural systems. So that includes water, ecosystems, energy, minerals, hazards, at both regional and national scales. And to do that, we will primarily be working with federal, state, academic partners to develop this capability and deliver actionable information to our partners, stakeholders, and the public. So the figure on this slide on the left depicts the various natural and human systems and the linkages and feedbacks that occur both temporally and spatially, in the environment. And if we look at the figure on the right, it'll illustrate how USGS and the partner capabilities will come together to do research, observe, analyze, and predict the current and evolving state of the Earth system, and build upon each other to deliver that actionable information at scales and both scales and time frames that are relevant to the decision makers like you all. And so while the scale of the Earth map is really global, an initial pilot to build a regional scale prototype of this capability will take place in the Colorado River Basin, with initial work to begin in earnest probably in 2022. But I wanted to at least provide a brief overview of USGS vision for Earth map to just provide a context for the integrated monitoring, modeling, and assessment programs that are being initiated by USGS Water Mission Area to evaluate natural and human factors that affect water availability in places like the Delaware River Basin and the Upper Colorado River Basin, which we'll talk about more on that coming up. So again, just kind of laying out some of this groundwork, the USGS Water Resource Science Strategy that was developed a few years ago lays out long-term goals to position our agency to meet the current and future water resource challenges. And the goals are characterized into the components shown in this figure here. So we need to observe. We need to provide society the information it needs regarding the amount, the quality of water and all components of the water cycle at both high temporal and spatial resolution nationally. We need to predict. We need to predict future changes in the amount of quality in water in response to changing climate, population, land use, and water management. We need to understand and assess. We need to advance understanding of processes that determine water availability. And finally, we need to deliver. In all of these, we need to deliver timely hydrologic data, analysis, and tools that seamlessly across the nation to support stakeholder decisions that you all have to make on a daily basis. So to accomplish the goals that were laid out in that science strategy, we've established these 4 core integrated programs shown here to advance the way in which we observe, we predict, and assess and ultimately deliver water resource information. Each of these integrated programs will have both national and targeted regional activities. The regional activities initiated in the Delaware River Basin and now starting up in the Upper Colorado River Basin are examples of these targeted basins where these regional activities will occur. We know that stakeholders, we know that you all have needs for actionable water intelligence to better understand near and long-term outlooks and risks related to water resources that have many diverse drivers such as hydrology, regulations, environmental setting, economics, policy and politics, to just name a few. And so therefore, we are striving to develop the capacity to more accurately predict and assess water availability through enhanced observations, integrated modeling, and assessments that are combining drivers of all of this, these things like availability, quantity, quality, and use that, typically have been considered separately. We're trying to bring all those together in these in these observations, these modeling, and these assessments. So we're going to provide updates on all these initiatives, but I'm going to focus on just the observing and delivering piece, which are tightly coupled. And as you see here, the delivery piece is the Water Information System Modernization, or INWIS modernization. We really need to modernize our data systems that house our information so that we can maximize our data integrity, the types of data that we can house or store, and as well as deliver. Because without a modernized way to transmit, store, process, and deliver these next generation or these additional types of observations, really the vision for the rest of these programs, these priorities, are going to fail. So really we're going to focus most of the discussion, at least my part, on the next generation water observing system. And the core goals of the next generation water observing system are to in addition to modernizing our INWIS modernization, so our data storage and delivery systems, we also need to provide the data necessary to evaluate and improve simulation and prediction skill of our models. So like the National Water Model, for example, but other complex hydrologic and water quality models with the specific purpose of improving stakeholder decision making. And then the other core goal of the next generation water observing system, or NGWAS, is to provide an innovation incubator for water observing methods and instrumentation development to sufficiently mature them such that they can be transitioned to our national network operations to ultimately improve efficiency, accuracy, and the spatial and temporal scales of our data collection, which all of which can lead to more information for you, the stakeholders. So what are the components of the next generation water observing system? So, it's really, there's a feedback loop here. So initially we've got to go into identified basins, and we've got to locate or understand the water monitoring gaps and data needs related to integrated water modeling and the stakeholder decision making. Once we've got a good handle on that, then we can go and hit the ground. We can establish the integrated set of both fixed and mobile monitoring assets in the water, on the ground, and also in the air through remote sensing and non-contact sensors. Once we have our network established, then we can integrate the delivery of all of those data sets to the users in new ways and more efficient ways that the stakeholders can ingest those into their decision making. And then once we have a little opportunity to have these networks operating, then we begin that feedback loop. We'll work with partners, we'll work with the stakeholders to see how well these new data and these new synoptic surveys are at informing their water prediction. Have they lowered their uncertainty? Are they, is the new information helping them? Or have we missed the mark in some places? And if so, then we go back up to the top and we try to fill in those gaps and maybe move some monitoring assets around and readjust a bit. So in general, that's the concept and the components of NGWAS. So I'll just touch on the design strategy a bit. So when fully implemented, the USGS Next Generation Water Observing System will intensively monitor at least 10 medium-sized watersheds, so in the 10 to 20,000 square mile range, and underlying aquifers for those that represent larger regions across the nation. So data from these intensively monitored watersheds will then be used alongside the data from our existing monitoring networks to help develop advanced models to fill in data and knowledge gaps at both regional and national scales. So for example, the Delaware River Basin represents a range of environmental settings of that northeast hydrologic region. So the intensive observations in the Delaware can lead to refinement of physically based engines of models in that particular region. And then those models can be applied more broadly at national and regional scales for improved predictions and assessments. And so the headwaters of the Colorado Gunnison River Basin was recently selected as that second basin for intensive monitoring investment as part of NGWAS. Now, I think a key point I just want to make here is that even though NGWAS will be focused in this upper Colorado Gunnison River Basin, you know, the areas to be investigated by our prediction and assessment programs, which Mindy will talk about, will include, but likely extend beyond that basin to the full upper Colorado. So we just want to, you know, just clarify that, you know, NGWAS will be focused in a basin, but our prediction and our assessment, our regional prediction and assessment activities could expand, you know, beyond that particular basin. So that's just a distinction that I wanted to bring up. That won't happen in all cases, like the Delaware. We didn't really have to do that, but in the upper Colorado, it lends itself to that a bit. So I just want to provide some updates on where we are in the Delaware River Basin. This has been going on for about two years now, the NGWAS implementation in that basin. So just wanted to give you a quick update on where things are. So I want to touch on different aspects of new monitoring technologies. So in the Delaware, so from a stream flow perspective, we've got 50 new or reactivated stream gauges, and this was guided by a gap analysis and network design, and really also focused on enhancements to our communications, new ways to go about transmitting our data, and also evaluating new technologies for stream flow measurements, so non-contact sensors and actually drone-based discharge measurements as well. Water temperature, so almost 100 new or reactivated temperature sites in the basin. You can see those in the kind of a pink color. And we're also evaluating new technologies for water temperature. So using drone-based technologies, temperature strings, synoptic surveys, FLIR cameras, actually this is a picture from a camera that actually picks up differences in temperatures. So we can start to understand groundwater, surface water interactions a little bit better. Oops, sorry, jumped there. So from salinity. Salinity is also a major concern in the Delaware River Basin, and so far we've got 64 new or reactivated salinity or specific conductivity sites. Again, this was guided by gap analysis and some input from stakeholders. And synoptic surveys. So this is going to be part of NGWAS and all of the basins that, in addition to continuous monitoring upgrades, we're also going to be doing various synoptic surveys that are high spatial intensity, short duration monitoring that will seek to extend our understanding in the basin for specific needs of our stakeholders. So in early December, we did a salinity front monitoring in the lower Delaware River Basin to characterize water quality and bathymetry as well. And in the summer of 2020, we plan to do a main stem dissolved oxygen survey in the Philadelphia area and downstream to understand the dynamics of DO and DO sag in that area. We also have these test beds. So these are going to be sites in each of the NGWAS basins where we're really they're really our primary incubators, innovation incubators, where we do a lot of testing, a lot of methods development. We put out new types of sensors that really aren't ready for prime time to determine the best way to go about using them. If these sensors, you know, are ready to be applied to our national networks. And so we've got two sites right now in the Delaware, one at the Independent Seaport Museum near Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, and then in the upper part of the basin, in the Neversink Basin in New York. And so you can see some of the activities that we've got going on in at these testbed sites. But these are going to be key elements to NGWAS and allowing us to go from research to operations with new types of technologies. And just want to touch on some highlights of what we've got planned in the Delaware and FY20. So from sediment, we're doing intensive monitoring of sediment transport in one particular basin, but other key locations to help to really start to improve our sediment understanding in the basin. And these measurements of sediment quality and source will, we'll use sensors for time series sediment surrogate data as well, and allow us to understand sediment a little bit better in these basins, but also from a national perspective. Soil moisture, we really need to advance our soil moisture capabilities, and so developing a pilot soil monitor. This particular basin, we're going to be looking to test to see what kind of design we can use to expand soil moisture monitoring throughout the basin. Groundwater, we're adding additional groundwater sites. We're expanding the use of temperature, and coupled with air temperature at about 50 sites to understand better the groundwater surface water relationships. Water use, we are looking to expand basin-wide monitoring of self-supplied domestic water use monitoring. For water budget specific components, stable isotope monitoring and surface water and precip to help improve model calibration. And temperature salinity combos, their deployment of sensors for those constituents at 3 depths at 2 sites in the Delaware Bay. And then R&D, so some research and development is a big part of NGWAS from a monitoring perspective. And so we're looking at evaluation of eDNA for HABs detection, testing of passive samplers for PFAS, using cameras for stage and velocity estimation, as well as ice detection, radiometers for remote sensing calibration, spectral source tracking of sediment, and then new telemetry systems. So some exciting things that we've got planned for FY21, and we're just over halfway done as well in the Delaware based on the amount of investments that we plan to put into each basin. And that is very dependent upon our appropriations each year, is how much we can add to a basin, given that we know we have operation and maintenance of the existing infrastructure that we've put in. So I'll shift now to just touch on the headwaters of the Colorado Gunnison River Basin, which was selected as our next basin. 2020 is a planning year in this basin, and so what we plan to do, some of this we've already done, is develop a registry of potentially interested stakeholders. So we've done a large part of that. We're adding to it a bit, but we feel we've got a pretty good handle on that. We hosted a webinar to introduce stakeholders to these initiatives and really provide a background for face-to-face stakeholder meetings that we intend to have across the basin later in the year. During that webinar, we also rolled out a stakeholder feedback survey, and we got really good response to that. And those on the phone who provided input or feedback, we really appreciate it. And we're triaging all that information now, and we'll provide a summary. The next, hold face-to-face meetings if we can to further identify these key stakeholder needs from not only a monitoring but a prediction and assessment perspective. And then from that information from the stakeholders, we're going to develop use cases, narrowing down a short list of these data gaps and science questions that we need to address. And then ultimately, those will lead into an integrated monitoring and science plan for the full Upper Colorado Basin. And so those are our plans for 2020. And depending upon appropriations, we look forward to starting to stand up some new monitoring in 21 in the basin. And kind of closing out on NGWAS, I just wanted to let you know that we are now looking to select that third basin, which we refer to as these integrated water science basins. And just wanted to give you a quick overview of the process in which we're going to go through to select this third basin. And the first is we've broken the nation up into these hydrologic landscape regions that you see here on the screen. And within each of these regions, we've kind of grouped basins into these general HUC4 basins. And each of those were developed a quantitative ranking. And there's a publication that's in press right now on the process in which we develop these quantitative rankings. So we use these rankings, and you can see here within each of these hydrologic landscape regions, with these bolded black lines, or hydrologic landscape region, each of these basins have a ranking. And so one is that had the highest rank, two, second, third, and so on. And so these rankings help to guide as a first step in determining, what basin we're going to go into next. We also solicited and reviewed input on basin nomination or priorities from our regional directors. So some of the intangibles, what kind of water conflicts are going on in a particular basin, things that you really can't develop in a GIS exercise, which was primarily what was used to develop those quantitative rankings. Then we'll engage national and regional stakeholders in each of these potential regions to understand the priorities, monitoring needs, and upcoming initiatives. And then using all of that information, we will work with our USGS Water Mission Area Executive Council to make that final selection. So we intend to make that third selection by the end of September of this year. This third basin, we are looking to be in the central Midwest part of the country. You see these boxes here indicating the areas of focus. And we really want to focus on HABs and nutrient delivery in this third basin. So those are the primary drivers to selecting this third basin in the central part of the U.S. All right, and the final thing I want to touch on is just our federal priority stream gauge network, and some just growing concerns about funding being flat since 2016 for this network. And as you know, it's our backbone. It's a federal backbone of stream gauges that has many uses that many of you rely on on a daily basis. And you'll see that there's two maps here, and these are the number of threatened FPS stream gauges in FY21, and then also in 2023 if we continue to have flat funding. And so the numbers on each of the states are how many FPS gauges will be threatened in each of those years and would have to be funded by some other source. We'd have to find other partners or something to keep those gauges operating, or those threatened gauges operating. So by 2021, 64 gauges are projected to be discontinued due to insufficient federal funds, or would need to have other partners come to the table. And then by 2023, there's almost 130 gauges that may be discontinued. So, the impact, you'll see there's a variation among the states based on flat funding. And the reason for that is that there's various levels of alternative funding sources from state to state. Some states have state agencies or governments that are able to step up and help fill the gap a little bit, or have made those identifications of other partners that may be able to help, and others haven't been able to as much. So that's why there's some variability there. But just wanted to bring that to your attention because it's a growing concern that I think that you all should be aware of, because I think it could impact you directly. And I don't think I'll touch on this for the sake of time. This just gives a little more details about the federal priority stream gauge and funding trends over the years. So I think with that, I can entertain some questions. Any questions about anything we covered?
Okay, Chad, sounds like
Okay.
I'm on deck.
Yep, take it away.
So can you see my screen, Chad? Yep. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yet.
Not yet? Uh-oh.
Not yet.
Looks like I'm slower.
Maybe.
I must be slower than you. Let me,
There, now I can see your screen.
you got it now?
There we go. Yep, now I see it.
Okay. So I'm going to give a update on activities associated with the Water Resources Availability Portfolio, or what we call WRAP. Chad showed this slide earlier and gave a really nice overview of the deliver and observe components of these 4 integrated water science priorities for the USGS Water Mission Area. I'll focus on the predict and assess priorities, both of which fall under the Water Resources Availability Portfolio. And Chad touched on this some, and I think it's really important to continue to focus on this, that along with NGWAS, these 3 activities, observe, predict, deliver, or obsess, and then of course deliver, will be carried out in an integrated manner in these selected basins, these NGWAS basins. And Don touched on EarthMap and a bureau-wide integrated direction, and the Water Mission Area is really taking that to heart and looking to integrate our activities across the mission area. And that's important because, you know, at the end of the day, water availability is not just about quantity, and it's not just about quality. It's also about how water is used. And so unless we understand all of those things in unison in an integrated manner, we really can't get to, can't provide the types of data, tools, and information that resource managers need to make decisions. So integrated water prediction, or what we call IWP, what is that? IWP is a national program that's designed to improve federal capacity to predict a variety of water availability drivers. Those include surface and subsurface processes, stream temperature, landscape processes, transport, and ecological processes. It has 4 main activities or components. These are currently all in a planning phase. We expect some projects to begin this fiscal year and some to begin in FY21 as well. These 4 aspects are community test bed, and this is a systematic framework to develop and test the skill of models. And the goal here is to formulate an investment framework. So after we test the skill, we're going to test for a certain skill. Where should we put our resources into improving model performance or model skill on an annual basis? Enterprise capacity, which is essentially the evaluation of codes, and for this, for enterprise capacity, we'll be evaluating USGS codes as well as codes from our federal partners. And this will help perform or provide the basis for our design and development of a new integrated modeling architecture. I've introduced IWP in past presentations, and now through the community test bed and through enterprise capacity, we're going to be rolling out on some work this fiscal year to get that design and development started. There's the observational requirements and data assimilation, or what we call ORDA. And this is really where we bring NGWAS into view. I mean, one of the motivations behind NGWAS, Chad discussed, was really that the capacity of modern models has far exceeded the data that we have available. And so NGWAS will improve the density of data available in 10 representative basins across the country that we can then really use to help improve model performance, and then represent those 10 sort of landscapes nationally. And then the test beds, or watershed test beds. Here we'll develop and test models to address important stakeholder needs. And here is where IWP will be working in basins with NGWAS and IWAAS. IWP will be the framework that is used to do our assessments. So IWP and IWAAS are very closely linked in terms of the tools that will be developed and the final assessments that will be done to help address stakeholder needs. So IWAAS, Integrated Water Availability Assessments. We've talked about this for a little while now, and there are four main tenets of IWAAS. That's evaluating current water supply and demand and factors that influence water availability, evaluating the trends in water availability, providing seasonal to decadal forecasts, and then supporting water resource management through design and delivery of these management relevant data, tools, and information. We'll be doing IWAAS at both national and regional scales. Nationally, that's through the National Water Census, we'll be providing a near real-time census of water resources at the HUC 12. Eventually, this will be fully integrated, and again, by that, I mean quantity, quality, and use. Currently, and here in the next couple slides, I'll show some examples. We've been able to deliver this national assessment in terms of quantity, and that's natural storage. And we are currently going through activities to include quality and use in that. And then regional IWAAS are going to be designed to inform and improve the national IWAAS, but also provide local and regional partners the data, tools, and information that they need to make water resource management decisions. So here's the concept map that was delivered at the end of 2019 in December. I took a screenshot of today's concept map, and so essentially this is an operational delivery of water availability in terms of natural water storage. That was the indicator that we decided on for this year. We're currently developing additional indicators in terms of quantity, but also looking at how to incorporate quality and use. For quality this year, we're leaning towards temperature, and for use, we're currently developing models to report water use in terms for thermoelectric, irrigation, and public supply on a daily basis. And we'll incorporate one of those as well this year, most likely thermoelectric water use. But here, every day, this updates on a daily basis at midnight and produces a new map of water storage. And we were able to create a little visualization. I actually had this done for the face-to-face roundtable in March. So it's not up to date. It runs through early March. But you can see how the map changes on a daily basis in response to weather patterns. And so I'd like to see us, do some evaluation of this storage map in terms of its capabilities and looking at things like stream flow or look at precipitation patterns and see how well we're doing here. But I think, in general, this is a nice concept. It's where we're trying to get to at the USGS, is looking at sort of this national overview of water availability. We've intentionally limited how deep you can go into this map because there are some technical limitations, and we're obviously working to improve those. But the goal here is really to show a national picture of water availability and use this as a motivator to look at and work with partners and stakeholders locally and regionally to help really drill down into what's driving these patterns at the local and regional scale. Of course, as I mentioned before and Chad discussed, we'll be doing these regional assessments in basins along with NGWAS and IWP, but we also intend to do IWAS in basins outside of NGWAS and IWP and take the lessons learned from those basins and apply them a bit more broadly. So we will be rolling out into the Upper Colorado, as Chad, I think, touched on for the IWAS. It's going to be a bit broader. We'll be looking at the entire Upper Colorado because we do want to try to address some more regional regional issues. As Chad also mentioned, these regional assessments can be used as a test bed for innovative methods and approaches. For us, would be more in terms of model prediction and assessment capabilities. Of course, using the data and the tools from NWIS modernization and NGWAS in doing these prediction and assessment test beds. For the Western Basin, and here it says Western Basin IWAS requirements, and really it shouldn't just be Western Basin. This will be requirements for all IWAS basins. But there will be a number of things that will be required in each basin, sort of a standard protocol or standard practice. We currently are developing an integrated science basin framework document, and that document will be used to develop our science plans for each of these basins. And this document will lay out these sort of required activities. Of course, one thing that is important to note is that NGWAS, IWP, and IWAS will not roll out at the same time together in these basins. There's going to have to be some sequencing that happens to get the most out of each aspect. And so while NGWAS will be collecting data in advance of our model development and of our assessment activities, NGWAS will use some of the tools developed in previous basins to help inform model development. Some of these national tools can also help inform sampling design. We'll all be working together in terms of stakeholder engagement. So when we go into a basin, we'll come into the basin in an integrated manner and do stakeholder engagement as all three activities. And Chad had talked about, what we've done so far in the Upper Colorado in terms of stakeholder engagement. And that was done for NGWAS, IWP, and IWAS all together. So NGWAS will be collecting data before IWP and IWAS get started, but it doesn't mean that those two activities won't be doing work right off the bat. There's going to have to be some data discovery and evaluation that happens early on. There will be some modeling capacity that will be developed to help answer these stakeholder-driven science questions. We'll be looking at water availability metrics and which metrics would be the most impactful in this basin. Are there new metrics that need to be delivered or designed as part of this assessment? What are the water availability influencers and disturbances in a particular basin? And of course, that will change basin to basin. What are the trends and drivers in availability? And the ultimate goal is to get to the capacity to predict and forecast water availability in these basins. Quickly, I want to touch on the Presidential Memo Action Plan. We reported on this last year, and we initially had 6 deliverables. The paddles on the top, the green paddles, are the national deliverables, and the paddles on the bottom, the blue paddles, are the regional deliverables. I've grayed 2 of them out because those 2 have been achieved. I showed you the visualization earlier of the operational delivery for the national IWAS. We delivered that in December of 2019. Obviously, we've selected the second basin, the Upper Colorado Gunnison, for NGWAS. We've also completed an initial drought pilot in the Delaware River Basin for IWAS. We're currently working on some additional pilot activities in the Delaware River Basin, but along the lines of this integrated science basin direction, we'll be moving that Delaware River Basin IWAS from a pilot activity to a full IWAS. So we'll be working with stakeholders and our water science centers in the basin to rework the plans for that pilot into a full IWAS over the coming year. In 2020, nationally, we have to incorporate water quality into IWAS, and as I touched on briefly, we'll be doing that through water temperature. Also in 2020, we need to align basin implementation for all of these priorities. I very quickly touched on the integrated science framework document that's being developed, and we hope to have that out fairly soon. In 21, we will be incorporating water use into the national IWAAS and working with the National Weather Service and NOAA to incorporate groundwater into the national water model. And we're on track for both of those things. And then in 2021, we have a goal to roll out a full IWAAS in the Western Basin, and we've begun planning for that with a goal to get that project started beginning of fiscal year 21. I want to touch on a couple of additional federal plans that USGS Water Mission Area is engaged in. The first is the Water Reuse Action Plan, which I now see is misspelled. The USGS deliverable or action in this plan is Action 2.5.4, which is to deliver integrated water availability assessments. The one thing here that I will say is while it builds on some of the deliverables from the presidential memo, I think pretty importantly, and something that I'm very excited about, is that we've added a goal to operationally deliver potential suitable uses of available water for the 8 categories of use that USGS reports. And what I mean by that is we're doing availability assessments in terms of quantity and quality nationally by the end of 21. And what does that mean for a particular type of use? There may be enough water available, but maybe it's brackish. So maybe it's suitable for some kind of mining activity, but not for public supply. And so we'll be developing the capacity to take into account the quality of water, how that water can be used, in terms also of socioeconomics, and then be able to incorporate that into our national assessments, so that as you sort of look from a national perspective, and you can drill down a little bit to see areas where maybe there needs to be more thought into water planning because there's a quality issue that is overriding maybe plentiful water. Let me go back just a second. One other thing that I wanted to touch on here, I didn't pull a slide together for it because it would be repeating some of the same information, but we're also actively engaged in the National Drought Resiliency Partnership. And the goal here is that we build on a lot of these deliverables to also evaluate water availability for ecological uses. So what does it mean? We talk about water for human uses, but the Secure Water Act has directed the USGS to also consider water availability for ecological uses, and some of our deliverables in the National Drought Resiliency Partnership looks at that. WUDR, I know that you guys are always interested in the water use data and research program and the water use grant. This is just kind of an overview statement. Here's a quick summary in terms of the type of projects that have been supported over the last 4 years. We've supported 47 projects that range from database improvements, QA/QC, data collection, and data delivery. Quite obviously, from this graph, you can see that probably half of the projects that have been funded to date have been done to support database improvements at the state level, and this completely tracks with the surveys that were done early on in WUDR, where states said that this was their most pressing need. It's also very important for us at the USGS because the goal that we're getting to is being able to deliver our water use information through models as opposed to through a compilation once every 5 years where we get data directly from the states. We'd like to start reporting at the smallest time frame possible Right now, we're shooting for daily, and we'll reevaluate in the next couple of years if it's daily that our stakeholders need, or if we can dial it back a little bit, maybe to biweekly or monthly. But right now, we're developing models in irrigation, public supply, and thermoelectric for daily water withdrawals. And it's really important that we be able to access state data as soon as that data is available, ideally through data services, to help validate our models with actual data. And so supporting these database improvements have been really critical for us in development of these models, as well as the projects that we've supported that have really helped to advance our modeling capabilities in terms of irrigation, public supply, and thermoelectric water use. So these have all been, I think, really successful. And then finally, I want to touch a little bit on the RAP portfolio and what this means. And so, you know, Chad talked about WASP being the observations side of the water mission area, and RAP is really the science, analysis, and assessment side. And within RAP, we have 9 programs, areas of activity. I touched on integrated water availability assessments and integrated water prediction, but we have a number of other types of assessment or research programs. Water use, obviously, I talked about a big push to improve our reporting for model development. Understanding water use and its impact on water availability, how people use water, when they use water, how much water they use, is really a key part of our capabilities in better understanding and predicting water availability. Water quality processes. In this program, we're focusing on key water quality issues like HABs, PFAS, and microplastics, as well as developing some proxies for different water quality issues that we can then model at both the national and regional level. Eco-flows, we're focused on things like eDNA capabilities. We have a pilot for eDNA in the Delaware River Basin, IWAAs. And we're also looking at factors that impact water availability for eco-flows. And here we're not just talking about drought, we're talking about water quality impacts and also things like floods and other hazards. Social and economic drivers. This is a research program that's focused on improving our understanding of how humans impact water availability. And again, that goes back to water use and understanding how we use water, why we use water, how much water we use, and how economics really drive that behavior. We have a program on water availability impacts of extreme events. I think it's really important for us to improve our capacity to not only understand how things like wildfire, earthquake, contaminant spills, floods impact water availability, but how can we incorporate these types of events into our models so that we can predict the impact of a flood of a certain extent or of a contaminant spill on water availability, both immediately after the event and long term. And then, of course, drought and understanding, as much as we can about the drivers of drought and how they impact water availability. We have Don, I think, touched on this early on in his comments, but it's an important goal for this program to be able to predict the onset of drought, and then be able to predict how long the drought may persist, and what that means to water availability, not only for human uses, but also for those ecological uses that are obviously important as well. And that very quickly is an overview of the RAP portfolio. I assume that both Chad and Don are on, and so I would offer up questions for any three of us.
Hey, Mindy, this is Deborah. I do have a question for each of you, actually. So I'll start with you, Mindy. The first one, or the question is, for the IWAAs that are separate from the NGWAS basins, how will they be selected?
That's a good question, Deb, and something that that Pat and I need to spend some time thinking about. Right now, obviously, we're going to be very much focused on getting IWAAS established in an NGWAS in the NGWAS basins. Our goal, honestly, is that that we have the resources to be able to stand up 1 to 2 IWAAS a year, and so we'll have to develop a quantitative process along the lines of what has already been done for NGWAS to be able to evaluate additional IWAAS basins.
Okay, great. Okay, this one's for Chad. They're asking that you expand on the third basin selection. I presume HABS is just one of several metrics reviewed by HUCs. Is there a planned general weighting among those other metrics?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so all of the basins have, like I mentioned, had a ranking scheme, a quantitative ranking scheme that really we brought into that ranking scheme 12 variables, and those are based on land use and land use change variables, climate change, water use, stress, and importance variables, such as water withdrawals, runoff, water use to runoff ratios, change in storage, flow alteration, so reservoir storage per area basin, and then fire risk. So there were 12 ranking variables that went in, and each of the basins got a score, and were ranked within each of the hydrologic landscape regions. And then we took the absolute value of the change variables. We converted all the variables to percentiles among the basins. We weighted 4 variables 2 times, so we added some extra weight to some of the variables. We summed the scores and we ranked them in each of the hydrologic regions. So that's really the main driving force to kind of, that's the first step and probably has the highest weight. And then in the central is we wanted to look, in addition to this, we wanted to look at, all right, let's put a little more focus on HABs or nutrient delivery in this particular central Midwest basin than we really had in the first 2 basins, right? The first 2 basins really didn't have a significant issue with those. They have some, but we were looking for to do a little bit more focus, activity, and monitoring in that realm. So that's kind of what drove the information that we used to drive, the candidates that we're coming up with. I don't know if that fully answers the question, but like I mentioned, we looked at also nutrient delivery. So we've got some sparrow models of the Midwest and Great Lakes regions, and so we were able to look at all the basins and looking at nutrient delivery to the downstream water source, whether that be the Gulf of Mexico, the Great Lakes, and the relative contributions of nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, from each of the basins to those receiving water bodies. And so that's also going into this selection criteria as well, looking at those basins with the highest nutrient delivery.
Okay.
And then we'll once we narrow it down to 2 or 3 or so, then we'll engage stakeholders and national, regional stakeholders in these particular regions I showed, to see if to see what they think, to see if there's some initiatives or priorities maybe that we've missed that might tip the scales towards one of the basins.
Okay, thanks, Chad. Next question is for Dawn. Is there anything new on advisory committee on water information, both the ACWI itself and the ability of subcommittees to continue their work?
Thanks for that. So ACWI is no longer, and subcommittees cannot do their work per se as a function of ACWI. Some work is continuing outside of the auspices of any advisory committee role. And we are still looking at how some of the more critical functions where they might find a more permanent home. So the short answer is not much news, and currently there's no official capacity to do ACWI subcommittee work.
Thanks, Don. The next question, I'm tossing it out to anyone who'd like to respond. Wondering how the USGS is coordinating its eDNA pilots with ongoing efforts by EPA and the U.S. Forest Service.
So I'm not 100% about the Forest Service, and Chris, I think I saw the question popped up from you, and so it's something that we should follow back up on. I know that the folks that are doing the eDNA pilot in the Delaware have had interaction with EPA. But really what we're talking about here is methodology and understanding the capacity of different methods. So Chris, let's touch base and let me get to understand more about what Forest Service is doing in particular, and maybe get the folks from the Delaware pilot in touch with folks from the Forest Service.
Okay, thanks. Okay, another question coming in. In terms of the predictive modeling you are doing, specifically in the area of drought, but generally speaking, all other areas too, are you thinking that USGS will be offering forecasts at some point in the future, or will predictions be passed through to other entities? For example, National Weather Service to deliver to end user.
So I would say that the ultimate goal for this is to have the operational capacity in our predictive capabilities, but there is a role for the USGS, and that's in terms of developing the science, and there's a role for the other federal agencies. For the drought program specifically, this is something that, we're going to be doing the research behind developing the capability. So I don't know exactly how long in the future we would be able to deliver it, but that is something that we're developing a project for, or we'll be developing a project for here fairly soon. It's our goal, obviously, to work across the federal community in all of this and really partner as much as we can. USGS brings the research and the science capacity to help really push and advance these kind of operational capabilities, but it's not necessarily across the board with a lot of these priorities. What we should be doing in the long run, really, it's working with our federal partners to help improve the science behind some of their operational deliverables.
This is Don. I'll chime in. It really is a mix, and it depends on what exactly is being forecast and what's the time frame. So, as Mindy mentioned in her talk, we're working actively with the Weather Service to improve the groundwater modeling aspect of the National Water Model for their routine operational forecasts with that modeling framework. That's a case where that particular forecast system is part of the overall Weather Service forecast repertoire for rivers and stream forecasts. So the forecast centers are working on that as well. But we know that we need to get groundwater in, even for the short-term forecast cycle, to get low flows improved in the model and things like that. But currently, the Weather Service is focused primarily on routine operational forecasts and kind of the 0 to 10 day time frame. For US and USGS is committed to supporting the science development to help Weather Service improve their modeling capacity. where USGS may go into its own prediction, or is likely to go into its own prediction capability, is really in more of the, not so much routine daily type stuff, but to be able to predict long range, short, medium, and long range effects of water availability issues that Mindy's talked about, and those kinds of things. So when we typically today, when we do a study, we will assess what has happened and what's the current situation. We want to improve the ability to say what we think will happen in the future. So we're using the term prediction more than forecast, because we tend to associate forecasts with kind of routine weather, water, and climate forecast that's more Weather Services domain, whereas prediction is more of a generalized science capacity to talk intelligently about what might happen in the future.
Great. Thanks, Don. I don't have any more questions in the queue. So I think that wraps this up then.
All right. Well, again, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you all this afternoon. Really appreciate it, and obviously doesn't quite get to what a face-to-face meeting would have done, but still nonetheless important to try to get together in the way we can. So thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot for your time, and thanks for everyone's questions and for joining today.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Have a good day.